the South Carolina's next governor is heating up. Governor Gavin Newsom swinging through South Carolina.
Good morning, South Carolina.
Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace. She's a fighter. I know about that. She's a fighter.
Let's get ready to rumble on this Sunday in South Carolina. Nancy Mace has a special announcement set for tomorrow morning in Charleston at the Citadel, her alma mater. Likely about the governor's race. But know who's not running for governor? Gavin Newsom, Tim Walz, or Donald Trump, who are prominently seen in that video that we just saw there that was released just a few days ago. So let's break down the latest presumed entrant into the governor's race with our friends Catherine Glenn Foster and Dave Wilson. The race for governor, it clearly says in the ad. California's governor is not running for governor here. Minnesota's governor is not running for governor here.
No.
But only one person can stop them, according to the ad.
And there's only one thing that we know, and that is that Nancy Mace is a fighter.
We do know that. And the president said so.
And that Donald Trump at least said her name 3 different times in 3 different speeches because
at some point in time,
they've actually been recorded.
Nancy Mace.
And we just saw it.
Yeah. And so we got a special announcement. We joked about the special announcement for Pam Evitt. You know,
Ralph Norman just had one. Yeah.
And we're at a point right now. We all know what's going on. The race for governor is finally starting to take shape now. You've got Kimbrell, you've got Wilson, you've got Evitt, you've got Norman now, you've got Mace. That kind of rounds out
from the GOP side.
From the GOP side. Yeah,
it has to.
Right.
That splits the vote so much at this point.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had the very early poll last week that we talked about, and we want to show that real quick just to remind people. This was from American Pulse Research and Polling. This is the first poll, independent poll put out. The AG, Alan Wilson, is in the #1 spot, already declared. Nancy Mace not yet declared, but we know she's going to. At #2, Pamela Evitt, 11. Ralph Norman, who just declared last Sunday afternoon. So he's kind of lost in the wash here because Nancy's now got the announcement. And poor Josh Kimbrell, not even listed in the poll,
right.
Which leads you to believe it's likely low single digits for him. But still, a candidate who has declared for this race. But as you said a week ago, this is just a snapshot in time. This can all change, and there's a big chunk that is not included here of undecideds.
Exactly.
Right. You've got at least a third of voters, because if you add all those numbers up, you're right at 65%. Well, you've got 35% of voters who have absolutely no clue who they're going to be voting for right now. And why would you? I mean, let's just be honest right now.
Yet.
We've had plenty of conversations on the air and off the air over the fact that what separates these people besides personality alone?
Personality, connection with the voting population. You know, that's what they're going to be turning to at this point in the game, because, you know, we don't have a Trump endorsement, obviously.
No,
and
we won't for a while.
Not for quite some time. And so many of them have very similar policies, similar proposed agendas. Really, we're starting just now to get any kind of breakout. When we look at especially Mace and Norman and looking at loyalty versus party purity, that's where we start to see things get a little bit more interesting. What MAGA voters are going to value more.
Well, and the other part of it too, though, is you've got Ralph Norman, who is endorsed by Nikki Haley. You cannot be more anti-MAGA than that.
He's the only one that's
right.
not jockeying for the Trump stamp of approval.
Right, because Norman, I think, is recognizing, if you look at who else he had endorsing him, Mark Meadows was one.
That is correct.
We went through a list before the show, and you look at, it's the old guard, the old GOP.
Jim DeMint.
Jim DeMint is another
There's
example.
a name I haven't thought of.
Right.
Exactly.
So when you look at who is behind him, it's an old guard Republican, not the current Trump Republicans like we're seeing everybody else chase after. So maybe Ralph Norman has recognized, I've got a lane here. If I can get 20% of people who don't like Donald Trump, who would be willing to say, I'm going to throw my vote to somebody else.
And he's already at, what, 7.7%, even in this very early poll, which it's really telling to me, because with 35% undecided and Norman going after the independents, the people who are more about the party purity and a little bit less into the populism of MAGA, I think we have a real shot at a very interesting race.
I think so. It definitely, at the primary, it will not be decided.
No.
Too many candidates. You got right now we have 5. I hope it stops there because that field will get far too crowded, and our resources will be stretched thin getting to all of those campaign ads. I can tell you. I can tell you.
We will want to talk about something other than these 5 people every Sunday morning with you. So.
And on the Democratic side, we don't have any official entrants yet, but all by himself. A friend of this program, Representative Germaine Johnson of Richland County, appears to be the only man standing, or woman, on that side of the aisle. He's got the exploratory committee. He announced that the weekend of the Democratic weekend, back in late May. He may be the only candidate right now. No one else jumps off the page. But he's made a name for himself in a short period of time in the House.
He has, and he's following in some very powerful footsteps along this trail. We're looking at younger politicians who've come along sort of that same path. Yeah. For example, President Barack Obama, who was a younger, more of an upstart, and I can definitely see Representative Johnson following in his footsteps.
Yep.
And the Democrats cannot splinter themselves at any point in time in this early of a stage. They've got to start solidifying themselves around somebody right now, because they'll have one aim once you get to the November election. Once you get through the primary in June, their aim is going to be to try to take out as much as they can and bring in, as Catherine was just saying, a new crop of voters who could have an interest and find something energizing in a Germaine Johnson versus what you might see on the Republican side. So it's going to be a really telltale sign of however many of you actually show up for the primary election. We can't emphasize that part enough.
Got to vote.
You have to vote, because voter turnout consistently is in less than 20%. So when you think about that, that's you live in your neighborhood and every house around you has not gone to vote, but you have. And so that is a very telling sign of people understanding now you got to get involved in the process. Take the time, like you do with this show on Sunday morning, to find out where these candidates are and what they stand for.
That's right. And while 80% or so of the Republican candidates already declared are more about populism, are more about the people, nonetheless, it's going to be the Representative Johnsons and the Normans who are more dependent on getting out the vote, on reaching those independents and inspiring them to come out and cast that vote so that we have a more balanced electorate.
Absolutely. We don't care which way you vote. Just make sure you do it.
Right.
Come come primary day or any day, there's a ballot box open and there's an issue on the table. That's a good advice for anybody. All right, coming up next, it's not the governor's race, but it's that U.S. Senate race involving Lindsey Graham. And my goodness, did somebody throw down a gauntlet and some, let's just say, some harsh words for the upstate senator. He's a name. You may not know him today, but you're about to.
You will.
You're about to.
Wait till we come back.
Coming up next on Connect to the Capitol.
We need to restore representation in Washington to one that's based on God, family, and country. Lindsey Graham is a 70-year-old childless warmonger with no stake in America. Those of us with kids, those of us who want to have kids, those of us who want to have grandchildren all have to pay attention now.
All right, that is Paul Dans, one of the co-authors of the much talked about Project 2025, coming out swinging against Senator Lindsey Graham the other day in Charleston, where he announced he's going to give him a GOP challenge. He was a first-term Trump administration official. He says there's room for a GOP candidate in this race who's more aligned with and more loyal to President Trump. He points to Graham challenging Trump in the 2016 presidential primary as him not being loyal. And we do know the president already is backing Lindsey Graham in his re-election bid. Those are some words right there on a Sunday morning from Paul Dans. He's on attack.
They most certainly are. As a woman, we are used to having our fertility, our reproduction talked about. This is a little bit new.
This is different.
No longer are we hearing from J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, about childless cat ladies.
Yep.
We're now hearing that Senator Lindsey Graham is a childless warmonger. which is fascinating. I would love to know by what calculus we figure out human worth, and if perhaps Dan's counts for 4 times as much because of his 4 children. I don't know. Does that multiply with grandchildren? It would be very interesting to hear about this. But
his math, maybe it does.
Okay,
Yeah.
but wait a minute. It's Sunday morning. You're watching this show. We've told you the name of a man from Massachusetts.
Yep, he's a New Englander.
Who is running for a South Carolina U.S. Senate seat against Lindsey Graham.
does he eat grits?
He's going to have to learn.
He's going to have to learn. And is his tea even sweet? Right. Here's the thing. But here is the PR side of it. You know what we're doing right now on a Sunday morning? We're talking about Paul Dance.
We sure are. He made sure of it.
He made sure that statement was enough to light a media fire. We're grabbing hold of it. We're sharing it with you because that's what we do here on a Sunday morning. But that's the only way he gets any level of traction in this state.
Yeah. And that's true because his background is very wonky. Let's be honest.
It is. It's interesting.
Former director of Project 2025.
Yep.
So when you look back at much of what the Trump administration has done to date, love it or hate it, much of it is based on the Project 2025 agenda. This 900-page document that
nobody's read the entire document.
Nobody's read it. I guess
they tried to read it at the DNC.
Yeah. Well,
they did try at least.
You do your best. But with that said, very wonky, very interested in purity and traditional conservatism, social
family
conservatism.
values.
Exactly, proven by, I guess, kiddos. It's going to be really, really interesting to see if he comes out with anything beyond that, or if all he has is sound bites, old talking points, and a 900-page tome of policy that most Americans don't seem to agree with.
And the other side of it, and let's just be honest, I can almost guarantee you in this past week, I don't think Paul Dance has been on the golf course with the president.
No.
I can guarantee you Lindsey Graham has been. So to say that you're closer to the president than Lindsey Graham in this particular case, I don't know if you've seen any other headlines, but I certainly don't see Paul Dance's name showing up in anywhere else except us talking about him because he made a warmonger, childless warmonger statement in our state.
Mm-hmm. Well, simultaneously also claiming that the president has not gone far enough and criticizing the president for not achieving enough of the Project 2025 agenda.
And this goes back to conversations that we had when we started talking about Project 2025. If you've also watched On Point with Cynthia Hardy, those discussions have been going on her show as well, because what's included in those? What does it mean for every community across the state, across the country? And there are going to be some folks, I don't think, who are going to be very happy at all with him entering this race.
The Graham camp did respond to that. By the way, Cynthia Hardy's seen every Sunday, 7 o'clock.
Exactly.
Right here.
Right here. We have that statement from the Graham campaign in response to Paul Dance. They had some things to say. They say, while Senator Graham was working tirelessly to elect President Trump last year, Paul Dance was doing everything he could to torpedo President Trump's campaign. Dance is a New Englander who crash-landed into the Palmetto State with an axe to grind against Trump's team. They didn't go as low, but they dipped down a little bit.
They did.
I'm sorry. You take the Palmetto State and crash landing in the Palmetto State. Have you seen our state logo? Did you find out what happens when we try to shoot at the Palmetto tree? The balls bounce off. And I think that's exactly the same sort of thing we're going to be seeing happening right now with Paul Dance.
That's right.
Yeah, that was an interesting Wednesday in Charleston, let me tell you. It really, truly was. That might be the last we talk about him for a little while, until he comes back to our fine state.
I would welcome him to come on.
He can come on if he wants. Of course he can. Anyone is welcome.
Yes.
We want to hear more.
I would love to hear some more.
Yes, I would love to ask a few questions.
And we can't forget Andre Bauer, also GOP challenger. Can't forget the former lieutenant governor is also in this race. Hasn't said anything quite as extreme as Mr. Paul Dance
I don't think he has.
About Senator Graham. So I don't think he will.
Hard to top.
It is hard to top. It really is. All right, when we come back, we're going to get away from the election talk, and we're going to talk about what is being taught or not taught in your child's classroom, and what it has to do with the state budget. That's coming up.
Ooh.
Students throughout the state including our student plaintiffs, won't have access to the critical, vital information that's contained within this course.
I was upset and concerned. It felt insulting to my professionalism and the relationship that I developed with my students.
That right there, a teacher from Chapin and also an attorney for the NAACP. They were in federal court in Columbia on Wednesday. They're suing the state over a budget proviso that eliminates AP courses that have to do with African American studies, no longer available in public schools, or no credit is given for them in South Carolina's public schools. Also limits the amount of books written by African American authors that can be taught as well. It is an interesting move. They stick these things. We've talked about how budgets work. Sometimes they don't have anything to do with money, but if you want to get something shoehorned in that you couldn't pass in another way, you just stick it in the budget. This is one of those things.
I think this is a place where we didn't have earmarks this year. They specifically did not set aside money for specific projects. But the budget every single year does get used in a way to control what goes on through the legislative process into what goes on in our schools, goes on in our communities. Cell phones, prime example.
Yeah.
That was added in because of a proviso that was put into the budget that said if you have cell phones in the classroom, you're not going to get state funding. We saw that with other issues as well. We saw it we've seen it in transgender issues. We've seen it in so many different ways. The city of Columbia, we had oddity here the other week, Councilwoman Oddity Bustles from here in Columbia talking about the fact that if they didn't make certain changes in certain policies, that they were not going to be getting state funding that would be going to local communities. This is how the budget process gets used in order to control what happens in different institutions across the state, because oftentimes they can't get this stuff passed in a bill. This doesn't pass in a bill in South Carolina because you have to have public input, you have to have on the record voting, and those things don't happen. But this is the sort of, here's the paper, I'm going to slide this one in this time, just like we talked about earlier this year with the pay raise, in-district pay increase that legislators got and the Supreme Court slapped down.
Said, no way.
Right.
Away with you.
This is just really heartbreaking to me because, first of all, let's say that you don't really get into the weeds of what specifically students are taught. Nonetheless, it's taking away the power from the local people, the local schools, the teachers themselves, who are saying, we know these students, we have a personal connection with them, we know what these students are needing, and now they're being cut off from being able to respond to those needs and teach them in an appropriate way. But even more fundamentally, this it chills speech constitutionally, and it's really discrimination against. It's the erasure of Black identity from education, from schools, and so it's about Black history, Black culture, Black civic life, all these critical elements. Books about racism, anti-racism, are being stripped away, so that when we have a student who's hungry to learn, a student who wants to know about their history, their ancestors' history, and now they're being told, no, you don't even have access to this book in our schools. It's hard to imagine what that would do to someone, to have your identity, your ancestry erased when it comes to school credit.
Yeah, and the constitutionality of it is what is being argued.
Absolutely.
Let's just make this something that you may be able to identify with a little bit more. Let's say you play football. Your dad played football. Your grandfather played football. Guess what? We're not going to have anymore.
No more football.
No more football. That would make no sense. We toured an African American civil rights on Main Street. There's a small, it's kind of like a set aside area within the Columbia Art Museum. That's about the plaques that if you walk along Main Street here in Columbia, you'll see a civil rights path. There's about 63 different displays that are all along Main Street that talk about the history of civil rights in the city of Columbia. If that, and it gets a small, and it wasn't a very large room at all, but it has that set aside for it, but you don't have this going on into our classrooms.
And we recommend that to everyone, by the way.
Yes,
free
we
to
do.
enter.
It is the type of thing that you want to sit there and ask the question, what else am I not being told?
Right.
And that's the place where you have sometimes among conservatives, well, you know, if we send our kids to the state university, they're going to sit there and get liberalized. Well, part of that is to also understand there's a broader scope
Than just what you think.
Than just what you think. And that's part of what the education process is supposed to be. Why do we study world history? Why do we study world literature? Why do we study all these other things? I don't see those being taken out.
And if your worldview can't stand up to being challenged by just learning about some other perspective, that's a concern. And furthermore, as a mom and as an educator, one of the best ways to get people, to get a student, a child excited about learning is to connect with them on something that they're interested in. Maybe their identity, maybe their hobby, their sport, their video game, whatever it may be. You lean into that, and then you find ways to attach all these other things that they need to learn to that topic. Again, it's being stripped away here.
Yeah, we don't know how soon a ruling will come. The NAACP's attorneys want it to be made before the school year starts. That's any day
That's
now.
Monday.
Right, but it's a fair
depending on
ask.
the district, it's Monday.
Yeah.
It is a fair ask. We don't know if it'll happen, but it is a big ask for sure. We'll see what happens because
and this is why we feel a responsibility to help you have a better knowledge and understanding of what's actually going on, because when these things go on and they get slipped into the budget, you've got to be able to start asking your state senator and your state representative, why?
Yep.
What are we doing? What else do I not know?
And then vote accordingly.
Right.
Like we were saying. All right, one more segment to come here. RJ May, a name we've talked about in an ongoing dispute between some members of the State House and the Freedom Caucus. That's when we wrap things up quickly when we come back. All right, disgraced lawmaker RJ May faces those federal child porn charges. This week, his former compadres in the Freedom Caucus sending a letter to State House leadership saying they want a special session called to work on expelling him from office. They may not need one because there has already been an ethics investigation that's been called for by House leadership. In some ways, we know that there's a kind of there's independent attorneys potentially looking into this case, and taking issue with this is Representative Brandon Guffey, who has been highly critical of the Freedom Caucus because of online sex-based crimes that led to the suicide of his own child.
Right.
So this is important to him, and even before that, he did have an axe to grind with the Freedom Caucus, no doubt about it. He's being critical of them for sending such a letter.
First of all, read the rules of the House. You do not bring in the House and the Senate into a special session to deal with a House member. Yep. That's not what the rules say. If you don't understand that, as the Freedom Caucus, maybe take the freedom of the next week and go read what the rules actually are. Because you don't have to go and involve everybody else because you want to make a big, huge statement. That's not what this is about.
But to be fair, the Freedom Caucus is busy trying to clean up this reputational blow. They've got this wolf in the fold scenario.
He founded it.
Exactly. Co-founder of the Freedom Caucus. And so they are doing everything they can to clean this up before it spirals even more out of control.
But they look elementary in the way that they're doing it because they're thinking, oh, everybody come back, so that we can all look better. The reality is they did not make a statement at the beginning. They did not do what needed to be done to put the kibosh on this at the get-go. Yeah. The rules are being followed, Brian, to your point. There's a process. They are going through the process. And it's happening. And there are rules that say 2/3 of the members who are present, and you have to have at least a quorum to vote on this.
So I think
in the House.
We may have already answered what's going to happen here. Nada.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen here because the other processes are already in flux at the State House right now to determine what's going to happen. I mean, RJ May is suspended right now and still being held without bail on those charges. And that's a discussion for another day because we know there will be more to come on that particular case, which is quite disturbing for Sunday morning. That's going to do it for Connect to the Capitol. We're going to see you in 7 days. We hope you have a great week.